brought to you by Brass and Unity. We make wearable conversation starters. Our new Buddy Check packs are available now. Grab one and check on one of your closest buddies. They may need it now more than ever. Go to brassandunity.com, use the code UNITY, and get 20% off. And let's all heal together. And brought to you by Combat Flip-Flops. Bad for running and even worse for fighting. Combat Flip-Flops are your ticket to the unarmed forces by providing you with military-inspired quality footwear for men and women. To help support the podcast and in support of women in developing countries, head over to combatflipflops.com and become a part of their unarmed forces today. Be sure to use the code UNITY at checkout and get 25% off. And brought to you by GFDA. Good fucking design advice. The voice in your head and the foot up your ass. GFDA makes prints, drinkware, and apparel for people who want to do their fucking best. Go and use the code UNITY and get 10% off now on anything on their site, including our collaborative product, Fucking Help Somebody. And brought to you by Daisy May Hat Co., the custom hat company based in Nashville, Tennessee. They make custom one-of-a-kind hats from wide-brimmed fedoras to cowboy hats. All of their hats are 100% beaver felt, and it's the highest quality hat you can get. They also have the coolest shirts ever. You can use the code BRASS at checkout for 15% off your entire order. Go and check out daisymayhats.com. Embrace the fever. Live the dream. And brought to you by American Yogi. In a world increasingly driven toward the grind, find your outlet for peace. American Yogi is a mindfulness-based apparel and wellness brand with international retreats, free classes, and rad clothing and accessories to support you along life's journey. Find American Yogi on Instagram at Live American Yogi or at AmericanYogi.com. American Yogi is proud to support the Brass and Unity podcast and its community with the code BRASS15. Join the mindful counterculture. Live American Yogi. Zachary Babcock, the host of the Underdog Empowerment Podcast. You and I linked up on Instagram. I used to hate social media. I'm starting to think it's a huge tool and it's really working in my favor. Thank you so much for being on the show. You are so fucking cool. I've learned about you a little bit and I can't wait for our listeners to kind of get to know who you are.
Well, thank you for having me here, Kelsey. It's an honor, and I had a blast with you on the podcast just a minute ago on my show. So I'm excited to keep that flame going here for this show as well.
Yeah, man, I think you're a really interesting individual. You kind of caught my attention. The first time I got an email from you, I got a cold email from you. And this was the most dialed out, serious, legit. I'm here. I'm not fucking around. Pay attention because this is who I am email. And I was reading this. I'm like, this guy's impressive. Looked you up on social. And I was like, wow, you got something going on here. And not only that is, you've been a person who's experienced some serious shit in their life and you've really turned that around, used it as an opportunity to grow into what you are now. So why don't you start with a little bit about who you are and why you are where you are now?
Absolutely. And I appreciate all that. Thank you, Kelsey. I'll keep it super short, right? If you want to get in, go deeper, we can always do that as well. But high level Cliff Notes version, grew up in psych wards, detention centers, juveniles, boys' homes, all that good shit. Had a lot of trauma and shit going on growing up with all that. And then I graduated to prison, did over 5 years of my life in prison. And then I turned my life around when I went back to prison just 20 days before my twin sons were born, right there in that jail. So I said, I'm fucking done. I'm heading in a different direction. And since then, I started heading in a different direction. I built a very successful business in a short period of time. It was a four-year overnight success, right? Because everybody wants to call it overnight success. 4.5-year overnight success. But I did everything that they said I would never do, and it still wasn't enough. And I realized that, hey, there was a lot of shit going on. The reason why I felt that way from my childhood and a lot of other traumatic events. And so I recently started doing that and been becoming the best version of me, and just really happy and excited to be here today.
Well, I think your story is one that needs to be told and screamed at because it shows that you can literally go from being in a system that treats you like a number to realizing that you can be more than that. You can take those tools and you can not only teach others from it, you can learn from it yourself. You can do the work. And I think that's really what's great about you. So how does somebody that young end up in psych wards and into a prison?
Yeah. Bad decisions by parents. No, I'll be honest. I'm not the type to just bag on my mom, because she was an excellent mom in many ways, but there was parts where she did drop the ball and she didn't show up for me. And you know, as a kid, you know, that's something that you can't control and have no power over. But like you said on my show, you know, as you become an adult, you do have the responsibility to own it and go and heal that shit, right? But how did that happen? I was my dad died when I was 7. And I remember in that moment when my dad died, when we went there that night and he got in a crash, and we went there the next morning, and they told us that he died. And my sister, she's 10 and a half, I'm 7, she's 3.5 years older than me. And we're sitting there hugging my mom, and my sister's like bawling her eyes out. And I'm sitting there, and I didn't know it at the time, but I'm disassociating from it. Like I'm like icing it all out and numbing it, not crying, just like almost like I left my body. It felt like, it's weird to explain, but totally disassociated. And then that pattern continued for a long time in my life, decades, but of the disassociation. But so I didn't really deal with that. And at that time, we had just moved from a nice neighborhood to Ferguson, Missouri, which is not a nice neighborhood. And I was getting bullied, new kid and all that stuff. And I'm trying to go to my dad to figure out like how to what do I do? You know, I don't know what to do. And then all that shit happened. So anyways, long story short, that from 7 started this whole spin, downward spin or whatever, just spinning out, and just a lot of bad shit happening. And I was smoking weed and wouldn't go to school because they told me I had ADD, ADHD, all this shit, and I couldn't focus, and I was never going to amount to nothing, and all these things, right? And I quit going to school, and I was smoking weed to numb myself from all this stuff. And my mom put me in rehab before the courts ever got their hands on me. She was doing that, you know, with the intention of doing what was best for me, but that wasn't what was best for me. And then, of course, I got kicked out of there. I'm 9 years old in fucking rehab. So I went and fought a 13-year-old, the next youngest kid in there, to try and like, you know, to, I don't know what I was doing. I think I was doing it to try and like stand out and like look cool or whatever. But, they recommended that I go to a psych ward. My mom went ahead with that. And she thought she was doing what was best for me. That's the worst thing that she could have possibly done for me. I feared for my life 24/7 in there. Like it's everything like you see in the movies and worse. Like the staff are screaming at you and abusing other kids. And the kids are either screaming, horrified, or they're in the corner, like laughing and shit. And like you're getting all these fucking drugs given to you, and then woken up in the middle of the night with needles in your arm, with them injecting you with God knows what and taking your blood and all this shit, man. And that really fucked up my fight or flight response. Like I lived in a constant fight or flight response from like that moment on until decades later, until I started learning how to like calm myself down and shit and go and actually do the work to healing that shit up.
That's really unfortunate to hear. I've heard stories from psych wards, I'd say survivors, individuals who have been in them. We had a F-18 Super Hornet pilot who has the fastest ejectional in naval history. His body hit the sound barrier and broke everything from like the neck down. Survived and came back, and he actually spent time in a psych ward because that's what they did. They put people in psych wards if they don't want to take their medication, they're non-compliant, so they'll do time in there. And the horrific stories he told me about the treatment to adults, let alone children, is outdated, disgusting, and horrific to say the least. And I am very sorry that was a situation for you, because that's the most formative time for anyone. Your brain is making the connections. Your brain is saying these are normal signals. And when your body says this is acceptable to be in this fight or flight state like this, it's going to make your life way harder than it needed to be. And I'm truly sorry to hear that happen to you. I do also think we are some of the things that happen to us and how we view them, right? And then you're a testament to that. Could have allowed that to break you very easily. So after a psych ward, you move into a prison system. And I'm assuming you were quite young going into an all-male adult serious offender prison. I mean, that itself must have been horrific on its own.
Yeah, I graduated to the adult system at 17 when they emancipated and all that stuff, when I caught those cases. But yeah, I was going through juveniles and detention centers and all that shit all throughout like my youth or whatnot. But like you said, like even those experiences and the prison and all that shit, like, and I'm pretty sure you can relate to this with your own experience. Like I wouldn't take none of that shit back. Like I'm going and healing that
Right.
part up now, but that doesn't mean that I lose like the power that I gained from going through that shit. Like
Right.
it made me resilient as fuck, and I'm grateful for it, so yeah.
It's really frustrating when I hear about grown adults abusing children. I think frustrating is like probably like a minor word to use. I think there's definitely a more extreme version of that. I struggle when any individual utilizes their power to abuse another person, whether that's in a facility, whether that's in society or life, power dynamics. They're obvious, they're there, but when people do that and really take advantage of children in particular or young adolescents, and I think it's on the ownership of grown-ass adults when they sit there and say things like, you're never going to amount to anything. There's a ton of teachers who I know have told children, you're never going to amount to anything. You're never going to be successful. You might as well quit now. The onus is also on these grown-ass adults who are teaching our children and are working in these facilities. I get things are difficult when you're around people that are hard to be around. But most of the time, if people could just educate themselves enough to understand that somebody is hurting and that's why they're acting out, because something happened to them, if they took 2.5 seconds instead of being assholes and projecting their own bullshit onto kids and saying, hey, you're never going to amount to anything. They're saying that because that was probably what was told to them. They weren't taught any life skills. And so to see them in these facilities, in these places where they're supposed to be helping shape minds, or they're supposed to be helping others stay out of trouble or give them any sort of hope for the future, that irritates me the most, because those are grown adults, like I said to you on your show, who are bleeding on others because they're unwilling to go deal with their shit. And it's so infuriating to me. But like you said, you wouldn't take any of those things back. It made you resilient. It made you who you are. And I think that's the takeaway from that, is you can go through very, very difficult things. It does not have to be the end of you, all of you, or what your next chapter in your life will be about. You can choose to make it something else. So when you go through a prison system like this, and like you said, kind of said earlier, was you went back in a couple days before your twins' birthday, was it? You said. So
Yeah.
why don't you walk me through that?
Yeah. So I had already done close to 5 years of my life total. I did a little bit over 4 years stretch, and then I got out at age 23. And good intentions, was doing good, was drinking socially, but wasn't doing any drugs or anything. And I was working at a bar grill as a cook, right? Well, then I got this job at this clothing store because I would shop there all the time, and got a job there, crushed it, did 3,000 one day on a 6-hour shift. The whole store did 9,000. And so they gave me a promotion because I was 1/3 of the whole store operation. I only worked 6 hours that day. And so I'm like on fire, on top of the world. I'm like, yes, I'm finally putting my past behind me. I'm getting a decent job. It's not under the table at a bar and grill or some shit. And it's in sales, which is shit that I've always thrived in. I've always gravitated towards sales jobs as a kid. And I was really fucking excited. Well, 2 days after that, they called and said, hey, you're a convicted felon. You got to kick rocks. So in that moment, I chose to throw the towel in and feel sorry for myself, which I could have chose to kept going forward. But at that moment, I didn't. And I just went in a tailspin, became an alcoholic, raging alcoholic, like really, really, really bad alcoholic. And at that time also, got Stephanie pregnant, and ended up going back 20 days before they were born. And my whole life, man, I couldn't wait to be a dad because I didn't have a dad growing up. That was something that I really, really missed growing up. And like, I remember like, dude, just like playing football, and then like all my friends' dads would be at practice and shit. And then I would just like try to imagine how that felt, having a dad or having some dude that would show up for you, shit like that. So yeah, I couldn't wait to be a dad. And when I woke up from that, from being obliterated from the night before, and in the jail cell, I was like, holy shit, and found out that I wasn't going to be able to make bond or anything because I got a parole hold and they're sending me back. That was like getting dipped back in the grease, and that shit burns so much that you jump out, right? That's the way I put it was like, I'm done. It was so much pain, the worst pain I've ever experienced, knowing that I wasn't going to see them get born to help me change my paradigm on life and move into a different direction.
It's really, again, that's a frustrating thing to hear, because that sounds like that was a failure of the system to allow people to fucking progress in their life. So you were doing a great job. You were working in a space, you were changing your life, and you were succeeding in it. But because of past, because depending on the felony, especially in America, you're unable to get a job almost anywhere. That's where things are fucked up. The system expects people to come out and start thriving. But how? When you've taken every life skill, every tool, every opportunity to become something bigger than themselves, and you've said, nope, because of your past, when you were young, when you were uneducated, you didn't have the support you needed, that's going to define the rest of your fucking life. And that right there shows the perfect example of what happened. You were succeeding, you were thriving. But because somebody decided your past could ruin their future, they refused to allow you to work in an environment where you were of no danger. You were doing something great. That's just, our systems are, I mean, my God, we could do hours on that alone. So I'm glad that you were able to, maybe that was a shock to the system that was needed. Maybe it wasn't, but either way, you utilize that as an opportunity instead of allowing it again to be the thing that held you down. So how old were the kids when you got out for the last time?
Yeah, they were 8 months old. My twin boys. I got a daughter now too. I got my half daughter, our stepdaughter, and I said half daughter.
She's your daughter. She's your human. That's fine.
That's what I was gonna say. She's my stepdaughter, but she's like my daughter. Like, I love her like my daughter and treat her like my daughter. She's 13. My boys were she was 4 when I went away, but my boys were 8 months when I got out, and now I got my daughter that's just turned 4 as well. Yeah.
So you decided more kids. Let's just keep having more little humans. I mean, that's great. I've seen from the outside perspective, however much you allow the world in on your life through social media. I've seen you show up. I've seen you do cold plunges with your kids. I've seen you go the extra mile and take the time to be present. And that, I mean, that right there, you're not just saying it, you're doing it. And that's why it's going to make a difference in their life. And that's why they're going to look back at what you had in your past, and they're going to say, well, it was not that big of a deal because my dad's here. He'll show me how to not do that. He knows how to succeed after something like that. And if dad can overcome that, then I can overcome anything.
Hell yeah. And now you're talking about something that I'm super passionate about. So I'm not perfect by any means. But being a good dad and showing the fuck up for my kids is something that I make sure I do. It's a non-negotiable. And it wasn't like that. It's crazy. Is it all right if I share a quick story?
Absolutely. Go for it, my friend.
Right on. When I got out of prison, made this whole decision to move this direction, because I missed out my twin son's birth and I wanted to be there, for them. Well, I get out and then I get into business and stuff and all this stuff. And before I know it, like the first 6 years of me getting out, first 6 years of their life, I was working 16 to 18 hours a day, 6 days a week. And like, yeah, we had plenty of time where we had great memories and stuff and times that were present, but there's a lot of times where I wasn't present. I wasn't there. And I wasn't showing up like a dad needs to show up. And that started eating at me. And the beginning of 2021, I literally just was like, fuck it, I'm doing it. But I did have a team in place and a COO, but I went from 16 to 18 hours a day, 6 days a week, to 16 to 20 hours a week, and been doing that for over a year and a half. And I just scaled it back up to about 6 to 8 hours a day, but I'll never go back to that 16 to 18. But I'm fucking there for my kids every day. 4 p.m. I switch to dad mode. That's it, man. And I'm with my kids and we're doing shit like you talk about, cold plunges or something off of the fucking device. And we're doing something in real life together, whether it's playing football and I'm coaching the football team or whatever. But I feel like that's huge, man. Just think this. I just think about the impacts of that. And one last thing I want to say before I pass it back off is also, as I started doing like my inner work and healing a lot of my unresolved trauma and shit, I became aware that, man, I traumatized the fuck out of my own kids when I wasn't even aware of it at the time. There'd be times where me and Stephanie would be getting in a fight, arguments, and like I'd be so mad where I would break something because I was so mad and wanted to express my anger, but I didn't think about what kind of effect does that have on my kids where they see their dad screaming at their mom and breaking something. You know what I'm saying? Like that traumatized them, man. And so like that hurt me for a while, but now I know that if I'm showing up now and I'm continuously working on that shit and being the example, they're going to have so much less trauma to clean up whenever they get older than what I had. So that gives me a lot of peace of mind right there.
Listen, one of the best things I always say to parents who ever ask, they're like, how do you guys manage your schedule? You and Brady. My husband is a CEO. He owns a couple companies that he started. And we learned really quickly that, if we're going to have a human, we're going to have to do this strategically so that we can be present for him. You can't just expect people who, like you said, you have a company. Fortunately, you were able to take time. A lot of people don't have that. So it's about being smart and being present with the time that you're giving them, right? And you being self-aware enough to know that that behavior would have had an effect on them. And instead of continually perpetuating that behavior, you're learning from that behavior. That not only traumatized in your eyes your children, but it also taught them something. It also taught them that, oh, dad doesn't act like that anymore. Maybe there was something to be gained and learned from that. And if you didn't have that experience where you got angry or you broke something, you might not have been realizing really where you were at in your healing. Trauma shows up in all different types of things. And the way we talk, the way we perceive the world, the way that we eat, the way that we act, it does. Whether we like to admit it, people, the new popular thing is childhood trauma. Well, this shit's real. It's always been there when it's, but we've never been willing to expose it, dive deep into it and look at it. How is it shaping us as adults? How is it shaping us as humans? And, the one thing I learned from my parents are long haul truck drivers. My dad was on the road for 2-3 weeks at a time. My mom would be home raising us, and they communicated via yelling because that's how they were taught. They didn't learn any better. They didn't know any better. And I do not fault them from that, because what it taught me is what I don't want to do. What I don't want to do is I don't want to expose my kid to yelling and screaming. So that's something we just don't do. We don't do it because we understand that's how I knew how it made me feel, right? But you only know what you know. But until you have the tools to do better, you can't do better. So it's about equipping yourself with the right tools, right? So that sounds like what you've done. You've seen, hey, I don't like this behavior in myself. I don't want to traumatize my kids. I don't want to be that dad. So I'm going to change my behavior. I'm going to do the inner work. And that's where you're at now. So why don't you walk through how you got to that point and how you decided to start doing the therapies you're doing to really progress and bring yourself forward?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a bunch of like events leading up to it, right? But the events, like the big heavy straws that ended up breaking the camel's back, were at the end of 2020. I had moved out of North County in a not so nice neighborhood and not good vibes or none of that, and into Wentzville, and it was a house that we just moved from, and it was a nice house, and it was big enough to Lindley could have her own room without having to sleep in the nursery in our closet because we didn't have enough space for it, right? And so that happened at the very end of 2020. Literally, we moved in the day after Christmas because we wouldn't have the last Christmas at our old house. And then the very next month, 30 days later in January, I held my first mastermind in Pensacola, Florida, and had 10 entrepreneurs all over the U.S. fly down to this nice beach house mansion that we rented out and held a mastermind in. And at that moment, I literally did everything that they said I would never do, and it still wasn't enough. And I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, I got all this external success going, like I'm making the money in the business, things are jumping, so much momentum, all this stuff, but I wasn't fucking happy. And every time that I would achieve a goal, I'd be happy for all but 15 to 30 seconds, and then I'd be like, what's next? And constantly, what's next? It was never enough. I never felt enough, and it was just like moving the goalposts. And Eventually I learned that came back from me not feeling like I was good enough to be my mom's son, and never felt like I was good enough in school or good enough in anything, all this constant patterns of you're not good enough or whatever. That was a negative cognition that I had. And so, after I realized that, man, I'm just moving the goalposts forward and nothing's, there's no fulfillment here. I started looking into this stuff and to these treatments and stuff. And rewind, earlier in 2020, I had an interview with Tucker Max, and he, if you go listen to that interview on my podcast, the first one, Weird is jamming, and then about midway through there, I was talking about some shit of how I was growing up. He's like, wait a minute, you just contradicted yourself. And I was like, I wanted to be like, man, fuck you. You don't know what I've been through. But I had enough to step outside of myself and look at it. And that's really started getting me to start thinking about this shit. So anyways, long story short, after I was at that mastermind, I started looking into therapies, and I started looking in specifically for MDMA assisted psychotherapy, studied up on that all of 2021. Then October 5th of 2021, I went and did my first treatment. Been one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. And I'm about a little bit over a year into that journey.
Yeah. And you can definitely see it in the way that and the content you choose to put out, man. Your kids are really involved in your life. And I think it shows that you want to be present and you're doing the work for it, but you're reflecting that in what you put out. You've been, especially of late, you've been really taking time to, I don't say film or do things where your kids are there. And I think that's great. You're bringing them into your life where they're not a part of your life. They are your life, and you're showing them that, and you're showing them by being present. I just had, right before I did your show this morning, I had an individual on. She's a free diver. She free dives in a bikini in the ice. Let me just back that up. It's nuts. Anyway, we talked about the importance of being a parent and raising the next generation of thinkers and doers, and the real weight that comes with that, the pressures of that. And also you're learning to be your own person, but being an example, being a leader, and showing your children that when you have kids, your whole life doesn't end. Your life is just beginning. You're now bringing children into your life where you integrate them into yours. You got to remember, we chose to have them for the most part, not everyone, but we chose to have them. And so you can't burden them with your problems or say, hey, I can't go do X, Y, and Z. You need to show them the opposite, that you can still go do the activities you love, integrate them into it. You can still go learn new things. You can still participate in things, and they can be a part of that, but you have to be willing to do that. And sometimes that's a little more uncomfortable, a little more hard work, and it may look differently than you used to have your life before, but you got to remember, we are teaching and growing the next human beings, the next generation. And so they should be the most important thing. They should be one of the things that are being brought into all the cool things you do, and teaching them about their health and utilizing cold plunges and going to their sports events and being present for them. So many parents I see, we go to soccer, and, again, I'm fortunate. I'm aware. I'm not a single mom. I've got lots of support with my family. My husband and I, we go to the soccer practices. We both go. We go to the games. We go to jiu-jitsu. We watch the activities, and we show him we are here. We're here to watch you succeed. We also give him accountability. These are activities you wanted to do. Now you have to do them, and we're going to be here to watch you. But so many parents just drop their kids off and leave.
Oh, I was just getting ready to get into that as you're talking.
So you're going to drop your kid off. You're going to just give them to a babysitter. They're going to then go, what? My parents, the kid is going to think, am I not good enough for you to watch? Am I not a good enough player? Do you not care that much about me to be present with me? Because then what's going to happen is those little humans are going to think that. You're not going to think that, because you'll be off gallivanting or doing whatever it is, grocery shopping, or just having to get errands done. Don't get me wrong. But if you want to be the parent you say you want to be, you need to show up and actually do it and stop talking about it.
Thank you, man. Especially when you hit on the part where the parents would just drop them off. That grinds my gears. I'm like, you're just gonna drop your kid off at practice. Like, why? Like you said, why aren't you fucking there watching and supporting and showing them that you're there and that you care for them? That's huge.
Well, that's the one thing my mom did, right? Okay. So I was very lucky that my mom could stay home, and both my brother and I were in competitive sports. Okay. So it's not like she just had to bring one. It's like she had to bring us both. And then I got to a point where I was training in the mornings and at lunch and after school. And she's carting me around and doing all this stuff. That woman never missed a game. That woman never missed a practice. That woman never missed a training session ever. It was the weirdest thing the first time I ever fought competitively without her there. I couldn't do it. It's like missing a leg. You need the person that's there to support you. And whether you get along with your parents or you don't want your kid to do that activity, it doesn't matter. If they're doing it, show the fuck up and give them your time. You made the human. Don't put the burden on them. Done now.
Amen.
Grinds my gears, homie. Grinds my gears. Grinds all of my gears. I just think people should care more, but that's neither here nor there. So you're working on yourself. You're doing MDMA therapy. Walk me through what that's like. Tell me how that's been.
Yeah. My whole life I did shit to either, like, before I turned my life around, I would do shit like smoking weed or drugs or whatever to like numb myself out so I didn't have to feel the shit, right? Or I would do really dumb, crazy, dangerous shit, that would get me in trouble and potentially could even die in a lot of situations to feel like that excitement, right? Or whatever. So I'd put myself in these crazy situations, or I would numb myself out. And that was just how I did things. And then to deal with the unresolved shit, right? And then when I decided to turn my life around, when in that jail cell, when I learned I was missing out on my twin son's birth, none of that went away. All that did was just shift it to positive shit, but it was still there, right? So I became ultra successful in business and a crazy work ethic, and would work crazy hours and do this crazy work, and then have all these wins and stuff because I was chasing that high, that excitement of the win of the goal, right? And then it'd feel cool for all but 20 seconds. I'd be like, what's next? I don't feel like enough. Forget where I was going with that. You mentioned there was
no, it's okay.
MDMA
therapy, and really like how you got to there and like what is it doing for no worries.
Yeah. So all that, well, when I started doing this healing and stuff, like, even though I was doing all that shit, I was always on edge, and there was never like no real release of the shit, right? And then I did MDMA, and man, it's the first time I've ever felt a release in my life. I was like, man, this shit works. Like, I felt it. You know what I'm saying? Like, everything else before was like either numbing or masking it or whatever. This shit was actual release of that shit, and it felt so fucking good. Yeah, what it's like. I go down to Tennessee, and my guide's there that I meet with, and she gives me the dose and then gives me some blindfolds. And the reason why you have blindfolds on is so you don't have any outside external shit. It forces you to go inward. And about 45 minutes, the shit kicks in, and what it does is you don't feel bad or anything. You actually feel really fucking good on it. And I know because I used to do fucking MDMA, but not in the right way before.
Right.
But
different setting for that.
Right. Yeah. This is intentional, right? But what it does though is it just brings up all those suppressed traumatic memories that you've probably forgotten about. A lot of them, like a lot of mine, I've forgotten all about because my ego just stuffed it down, and that was what it did to survive and cope in that situation at that time. But it brings them all up, and you get to feel them. And like, you'll have, like, for me, not everybody's like this, but for me, I have really extreme somatic release, which means like my jaws are chomping like just like crazy. And like, I chewed up all the sides of my cheeks and shit. So like, I had to start chewing on my pillow whenever I'm doing this shit sometimes, like, calm the intensity down. But the cool thing is, as soon as you take the mask off and sit up, the intensity will drop down to like a 2 if you need to. I wanted to go in and feel that intensity, but I'll have the somatic release through my jaw. I'll have it in my muscles. Like, literally, you could look at my calf and I could see the muscles twitching and shit. The throwing up and the pooping afterwards of the trauma literally leaving your body. Yeah. It's some wild shit, but it felt even though it sounded like that didn't feel like good, that shit felt good getting that shit out and going to do it.
Of course it does. Energy moves through the body and it can get stuck. Like that's something I learned recently at my last eye experiences. You know, I was going through something and I couldn't crack it. I couldn't crack it to save my life. And I needed somebody to help me work through it. And it was a blockage. Its energy gets blocked. It does. The body keeps the score. It holds trauma. It's provable. It's written about. It is. And so you got the book there, don't you? Yeah. The body keeps the score. What a great book. What a great book, but it's true. And if you can start healing the body from an energetic level, you will also feel those releases. Like I have plenty of friends who are like, I never purge during ayahuasca, but they yawn these huge, exaggerated, your jaw feels broken after yawns. It's because you're having a release. You're just having a different version of a release than somebody else, you know? So these things are important to do. And working on it and setting is so important. I said that on your show and I'll reiterate that again. Set and setting is everything. And you're utilizing these tools properly. It sounds like this time. I mean, I've never dabbed a toe with MDMA quite yet. With traumatic brain injury, until inflammation is much lower, I stay away from MDMA just because it burns hot in the brain. It can cause inflammation. So I'm not at the point of needing that quite yet anyway. And I'm not really the person to go out and experience all of the psychedelics just because it's like the thing to do. I know what works for me and I play within my limits and know what helps me grow, right? I feel like at some point you have to find the tool that works for you and utilize that tool rather than just keep searching, you know, for something else to fix a problem.
I love that you brought that up too. Because I have the same viewpoint of that. Like, ayahuasca is something that I want to do and it's calling to me and it's something that I'm going to do. And I've done the psilocybin and the MDMA and I've done EMDR treatment. That's not psychedelic, but EMDR. And then, what I'm really looking into because of the Body Keeps the Score book, the chapter on neurofeedback.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's calling to me a lot because I do it. I even still have patterns where I'll catch them where I like try and like, I have a pattern that I'm aware of now that I can choose new patterns, which is awesome. And it's really fucking hard to do right now because I still got the unresolved shit that I haven't resolved yet. But like, for example, with Stephanie, with my wife, a lot of times when we get into our arguments, I would either do one of two things. I would either it outbursts, you know, like it did years ago when I'd break shit or whatever, outbursts, or I would ice her completely out and disassociate and not feel and not have to feel none of it. And I noticed that a lot. And my son Landon does the shit a lot. I could see him doing shit like that sometimes, like often La La Land and disassociating from the thing. And so that neurofeedback, getting those alpha waves dialed in and everything, you know, operating the right way up there. Really, from my understanding from reading that chapter on that treatment from him talking about that, really helps out with that. So it's something I do want to dive into. But like you said, I'm not trying to be a treatment whore. I just want to find what works for me.
Find what works, man. It's like self-help people. It's like sometimes people just self-help people, they just keep looking for the next self-help. It's like, okay, but at some point you gotta, instead of just reading the book and skipping over and being like, oh, I read the book, it doesn't work for me. Well, you gotta take some time and really invest it into whatever you're trying to do instead of just skipping to the next thing. So I think that's also really important, is like sit with it for a minute, right? Before you start going like, I want to try all these things. You know, sometimes you just need to sit back and listen, right? We need to listen more instead of just, oh, that didn't work, next thing. Oh, that didn't work, next thing. Fucking sit and listen. Why isn't it working? So that you can learn, okay, maybe that's not the thing for me. And this is why. But you never know why if you don't take 2.5 seconds to sit down and realize or listen to what's being told to you. Most of the time, I feel like that's the issue. But anyway, I digress. With these treatments and with things like neurofeedback, I can tell you the veteran community utilizes that tool. Psychiatry in the veteran community, there's really great research behind neurofeedback, heart mapping, things like that. Ayahuasca is a great heart opener. So if you're dealing with that kind of stuff, it's a really great modality and medicine for that. And it's powerful.
What do you mean by the heart stuff with the
Heart
heart?
opening.
Yeah.
You deal with the deep trauma, man. You deal with like the real nasty. It opens you up emotionally in a way that a lot of things don't. So like MDMA, from what I'm told, is like a big warm blanket, right? I is not
Uh-huh.
necessarily going to be a big warm blanket. It's going to be a big mirror of the shit you don't want to look at. If that's what that medicine believes you need to see, that's what that medicine will give you. And it can be
Yeah.
dark, homie.
I think that's why it calls to me so much, because it's like that um the the purge, right, or whatever. Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, the MDMA. So Tucker told me, that's Tucker Maxis, who kind of opened my eyes up to like this psychedelic stuff and healing of really put trauma on the map. I didn't know what the fuck trauma was until we had this conversation. But anyways, because I was talking to him about, because ayahuasca calls to me, and I was like, man, I want to do this purge. And he's like, he said it, he's like, dude, that's cool, but he's like, doing ayahuasca is like jumping out in the Pacific Ocean trying to learn how to swim the first time. He's like, I'd recommend starting with this MDMA stuff, and kind of work your
Mm-hmm.
way up or whatnot. So yeah, I feel like I'm at that point now. I'm getting ready to go do my 4th MDMA session December 6th. And I feel like
Nice.
2023 is right for the calling for some ayahuasca to try that out.
Yeah. Let me know where you're thinking of going, and we'll have a chat about that after. You want to be really safe about that and really careful about that. And there's definitely, with psychedelics booming, you're getting a lot of backyard shaman. So there is the right people to go for that. Like I said, there's definitely the right people for that. So we'll talk after.
Have you, or is it right if I ask you about
Yeah,
one
go for it, my man.
rhythmia or whatever? Have you heard, good or bad? And you don't have to answer if you don't want to on the show, but
I honestly don't know much about them. I don't, but I do
okay.
definitely have some places and some people that might be good for you. So
Okay.
I got
Awesome.
you.
Hell yeah, appreciate you.
No worries, man. Ayahuasca is definitely, he articulated that accurately. I'm not sure who that gentleman is, but it sounds like he knows, he's speaking about it truthfully. It is like just being dropped off in the biggest ocean in the world and saying swim. Like, I mean, it is. I do some writing after Aya kind of comes through on downloads, and I write a lot, and I wrote one, it's called The Depths, and it really can take you down to some of the most horrific places in the world, but it can also take you to places that you never realized you could feel relief from. Right. And I'll never tell you all the stories. That's why I didn't tell you any on the show, because I don't want to jade or color your view of what it can be for you. Because so many people go into these situations and they go, I want to know, how was ayahuasca? Like, for example, last time I was in Peru, and our group had all finished, and we were all leaving the next day, and we were in Tarapoto, and you could see these other white people that were in Peru, Westerners. You were like, I know what they're here for. They're the next group after us. And you could see the trepidation. And then one of them came over and said, how was your guys' week? Like, you could tell we also just finished. And one of our guys, she's like, can I sit down and talk to you guys about it? And I normally never would have done this because I'm just too open. I said, my buddy looks over, and he's like, what do you guys think? And all of us kind of were like collectively like, no, thank you. And not to be rude, not to be cruel, not to be mean, but it's not fair of us or individuals to tell you or put stories on you for you to perceive in a certain way. I want you to go open-minded. That's what I would always say, is if you're going to go sit with medicine, go be open-minded, set an intention. Don't color your thoughts and your ideas of what other people have been through. That's like one of the biggest mistakes you can make. Oh, ayahuasca's this, ayahuasca's that, ayahuasca does this. That's for you to learn. That's for you to find out, to see what ayahuasca is for you. For me,
Amen.
ayahuasca was a changer, a mover, a bringer of life, a healer, and also a horrific mirror. But sometimes it's what you need. And I hold true to that. It is your journey, and it will be whatever it is supposed to be for you. And that's how it'll end up. And I'm thrilled. I can't wait, man. When you come back on, which you're totally going to, I want to hear all about these experiences in a way that you're not only wanting to articulate, but when you're ready, we are here to listen, and we are here to support, my friend.
I really appreciate that too, for real. I'm excited. It's definitely calling to me. So it's definitely going to be in the docket for 2023.
I love it, man. I love it so much. I love it so much because I love that you're willing to do the work. I love that you're willing to see plant-based medicine as a healing modality that is really making change in your life, because that's what we try to articulate to people, is that there's other things out there than just pharmaceutical medication. Physical fitness is something we didn't talk about on your show. I know for you, you're active, you're doing things. So what is physical fitness and how does it play into your life?
Everything. What's funny is I recently did yoga for the first time, hot yoga at that, and that shit was bomb. It's really awesome because it's like that stuff, and the breath work and stuff, like getting like the sensories shit going. Like I didn't know like how much out of tune with my body that I was until recently, until I started learning about this shit. I'm like, holy shit, yeah, kind of am been shut off from my body for all these years and stuff, but starting to feel like tingling sensations in your toes and fingers and shit again, doing stuff. That shit's pretty cool. It helps me get in tune with that. But to answer your question though, yeah, for me, I'm like a warrior at heart kind of guy. Like I'm real fiery, a lot of energy. And like I was scared of losing that when I first started doing this healing stuff. But I realized like, no, it's actually making me more of a warrior kind of fiery type. And I'm also healing my shit and able to go on chill mode too. But I could still, crank on that at any time. So anyways, for me, that's where it's like therapy to me every single day. Like I have really hard fucking intense workouts that make me want to puke and pass out, but it's like a release of energy. And it just, if I don't have it, I notice like I'm in a crabbier mood and agitated more easily and not as focused and not as much energy. But when I do go and do that shit, man, I'm on point. I'm not perfect, but it feel a lot better.
Physical fitness is 4 times more effective than an antidepressant. That is why you feel that way, my friend.
Amen.
Yeah, you gotta expel that energy. You gotta let it out. And it's important. I'm glad that you're doing it. I'm glad that you're seeing it. And I'm glad that you're utilizing it as a tool to move forward. And the thing that you said that I just want to touch on before you leave is you didn't lose it. You just gained control over it.
Amen.
That's the difference, my friend. That's the difference.
Like I look at it. Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I look at like, all right, so, and this my theory or opinion on this could change as I learn more and do more work and whatnot. But right now, the book Ego is the Enemy, great book. I get it. It's awesome and stuff. But man, I don't feel like ego is the enemy. I feel like ego can get you in a lot of deep shit, but the ego is necessary for survival. It protects you. And I feel like you need to have a trusting relationship, and having your true self is the commander, right? And you put that ego as a tool on your fucking tool belt, and it helps you, whenever you are threatened with real threats, because that shit still does happen, right?
Yeah.
But it sits there as a tool because you're in control of it, right? And yeah, it can get you in a lot of trouble. Like that's a whole nother
Oh,
podcast.
don't worry. We'll get into that, my friend. I promise you. But I will tell you, we don't need to kill the ego. We need to change the power dynamic with it. It's that simple. It's hard work to do, but it is possible. I know you have a hard out time. So can you tell everyone where they can find your awesome podcast? You've got your lineup is impressive. From another podcaster, from one to another, I know how hard it is to gain guests that are just of the caliber that you have. So I really want to take time to acknowledge that. So can you tell everyone where they can listen, find you, and support everything that you're doing?
Absolutely. I appreciate that. The podcast, my social media, the podcast services that we offer, the live events that we do, all that is on underdogempowerment.com. Right there on the homepage, you can check out whatever's for you, whether it is you want to connect or listen to the podcast or come check us out, all on underdogempowerment.com.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for being on. This episode will be out soon, and everyone else, we'll put everything in the show notes, in the bio. Please go give Zach a follow. Seriously, his list is impressive. There's a ton of tools in his episodes, a ton of takeaways. Even just listening to a handful of them right off the bat, you're going to walk away with a ton of knowledge, a ton of education on how you can start your life, how you can keep progressing, and how you can move to the next level. And I think that's why your show is so effective. So thank you so much for being on, Zach.
Kelsey, thank you for having me on. I had a blast today.
Everyone else, we'll see y'all next week.